is Milind Shah, and it's my pleasure to moderate this session on science and technology, the new age dawns in India. It's a very interesting and a very, very vast topic. And as you've seen, we've got some really strong and multi-sectoral panelists to deliberate upon this subject. So before we begin, I'd just like to lay the context of what we plan to do today. So if you go back to perhaps the late 18th century, India and China were the dominant economic forces in the world. Between the two of India and China, we provided for almost 2/3 of the global economy. Indian technological prowess has been proven through Ayurveda, through algebra, through Pythagoras theorem, and so on and so forth. But then when you move towards the 20th century, the early 20th century, you see that Europe starts dominating the global economy. What happened? Why did India and China go down to maybe less than 5% from the 2/3 of the global economy in a matter of, let's say, 200 years? Perhaps one of the answers is colonization. The fact that we got colonized did impact us. But more than that, I would argue that it was science and technology. Europe adopted science and technology that created a strong backbone of industry, of science and military. And they created some great products, including rifles, including medicines for their seamen, including canned food which kept their sailors in good shape during these long journeys and so on and so forth. We go post-war in the second half of the 20th century, and America sees the clear dominant global economic power. They were also, at that point of time, the global science and technology leader. We got Japan, we got Israel, we got Singapore. Again, examples of post-war economies who have really grown on the back of science and technology. When we look at science and technology, the two metrics that one can think of are number of publications and the number of patent filings that we have. And in that situation, Indian record is a little bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, our contributions are growing from about 3% to 4% in terms of publications. Our patent story continues to be pretty low and slow. We filed something like 29,000 patents a couple of years ago against China's 1.3 million, the US about 500,000, and so on. So we do have an issue as far as patents and publications are concerned. And why does that happen? It's perhaps also because we invest less in R&D. Well, the US invests about 2.7% of their GDP in R&D. Israel and Korea, which have grown rapidly from a science and technology perspective, invest about 4% in R&D. India is about less than 1%. And even 80% of that comes from government rather than from private sector. So if given this scenario, where do we stand at this point of time? Well, at least we are the world's fastest growing economy, large economy. We have got some great examples which are world beaters. Take the example of ISRO, which launches 104 satellites together, 96 of them American. Take the example of generic drugs, where we don't reduce the cost of drugs by small percentages, but we by an order of magnitude and quality, meeting FDA norms, etc. Medical devices, an ECG machine, again, tremendous reduction in cost and so on. So that's one aspect. When you look at volume, scale, we are the world's largest, Hero Motors is the world's largest manufacturer of two-wheelers. Mahindra is the world's largest manufacturer of tractors and so on. So we do have a lot of examples of global scale. So if I try and summarize whatever I've said, we have at one level a glorious past going back 200 years, and we are kind of rediscovering our own way. Where does it take us from here? And that's really what our discussion will focus on. Before I get to the panelists, just one last point in terms of what today are some of the major challenges that mankind is facing. And then I'm going to ask the panelists the questions around, do we have an opportunity to solve these problems and to be leaders globally? These challenges are, as you all know, with environment, with energy, with food, with water, and of course health. And to respond to this, we have some really distinguished panelists who, between them, cover, if not all, most of these areas. So it's going to be my pleasure to introduce the panelists again, just a quick introduction, and then we'll get into the meat of the discussion. So on my right is Mr. C.S. Murli. He's the chairman of the STEM Cell, which is an incubator, a deep science incubator at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. As you all know, IISc is a research institution, and the STEM incubator over the last 10+ years has had an enviable record launching startups in so many different areas. He's also got an IT background. He's worked with TCS in California, general manager at IBM, and he's an alum from IISc. So please welcome Mr. Murli. Next to Mr. Murli is Charit Bograj. Charit is a cardiologist to begin with, but he's a two-in-one person. He's also an extremely good entrepreneur. He has done, he works today as a cardiologist consultant in hospitals in Bangalore, including Vikram Hospital, background in Fortis Hospital, etc. And today, as you saw in the short video, he is hoping to solve the biggest health problem that we have of more than 7 million people dying because they don't get treated in time when they have a heart attack. Next to Charit is Saurav Kumar. Saurav is the founder and CEO of Euler Motors. As his company's website says, he is, and this is the vision. I mean, I really like the fact that entrepreneurs today are thinking of big and massive visions. He's committed to accelerate India's transition to sustainable energy. He was the co-founder of Q26 prior to this, which is a company based on innovation firm based on revolutionizing the user experience across multiple devices and platforms, basically machine learning, artificial intelligence, etc. He is originally from Delhi, School of Engineering, and then he went to Cornell. And towards the extreme right, a real pleasure in introducing Noriaki-san. Noriaki Sakamoto is a partner at the University of Tokyo Edge Capital, UTech. He's worked with the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry in Japan. He's also worked with McKinsey before that. He is a deep tech investor. His firm is a deep tech investor, and they've made some really good investments here in India. So it's a pleasure to welcome all of you on the panel. I'm going to begin the discussion. Maybe I'll address the question to you, Dr. Charit, and to you, Saurav. As you wear your hats of healthcare and sustainable energy, machine learning, etc., in your case, Saurav, what are the areas of research that you see happening in India? What's the focus there? And why is that focus there? And I want to then have a supplementary question to that, which is that in these research areas, are you seeing enough IP filing happening? If it is not happening, why do you think it's not happening? So maybe Dr. Charit, you may want to respond first on the healthcare side, and then we get to
Thank you very much. So, healthcare is one of those great challenges which mankind is yet to solve. And access to healthcare is one of the key problems that is still an unmet solution. 90% of all healthcare infrastructure is located in big cities, where 10% of the population exists. That is one. Second, the gap between the number of doctors or healthcare professionals to the number of patients is ever increasing on a day-to-day basis. And it is this two gaps that need to be filled, and the only way to fill them is to adopt modern technology to solve the problem. So when people talk about technology for the next billion, and they talk more about payments and e-commerce, one of the important challenges that actually exists is delivery or enabling access to healthcare to the masses, to the people who really need it and who need it at the time at which they need it. A little bit about the technology that is powering this revolution, and I believe there is a revolution that we are going to see going forward, especially in the way healthcare is both used by the end user or the patient, as well as delivered by the healthcare professionals, is the adoption of modern tools. And this is where your comment on IP creation is very important. India, in the last 10 years, or the previous 10 years, has been developing products which are low on IP, and was known for services which were not necessarily IP. But what is happening now is the focus of deep tech innovation, and we are catching up very, very quickly with the rest of the world. Yes, we are definitely lagging behind. And to give you an example, if you were to index publications on deep learning, one of the hot tools that are used in both medicine as well as non-medicine, India does not score on the top 10 publication list, where research was being done in machine learning. But I believe that is the past, and I'm very excited about the future for two very important factors, and two things that make us very, very unique. First are the inherent or latent talent that exists both in academia as well as on the private side in startups and outside. More and more skilled people, more and more interest is going on in producing, in learning these tools. Second, access to data. So a combination of extraordinarily brilliant minds and access to data is what is going to drive this revolution going forward. So though I agree entirely that the previous 10 years we are lagging behind, but in the future, in the next 10 years, we are definitely going to be one of those leaders because of the combination of these things. Thank you.
Okay, so currently Euler is focusing on the energy part of the equation that you were saying. So India today has, I think, most number of polluted cities in the world. I mean, the WHO that has published a report. So when we were looking, I think last year when we started Euler, we were thinking about, okay, pollution is going to be one of the biggest problem in the coming, let's say, next couple of decades. How do we solve this problem? And also, while you're solving this problem, India offers a very unique kind of perspective in terms of you can't just bring in an electric vehicle, let's say, from a US or a European market and start putting it in India, and it won't function because there's no infrastructure, there is people's tendency to adopt an electric vehicle. There are multiple problems which are not just technical, but there are rooted deeply in the culture, the way we perceive about the benefits of electric vehicle versus the ICE engine. So the opportunity was basically huge, and we wanted to get into this business. And I mean, we saw the opportunity other than just make money. I mean, there was also thinking. But obviously, while we got deeply into it, I mean, we understood that it's a deep tech space. And the previous company that I founded was also in the software space, which you were trying to mention, was also doing a lot of machine learning, and we were doing computer vision and making devices smarter. IP point that we just talked, both the companies that I've been thinking and I've been building, I mean this company that we are building now, I don't think I filed a lot number of IPs. When we started Q26, we started out of US. I think initial first 2 years, we were very focused about what technologies we were building. We in fact filed most number of patents while I was in US. Then I came to India, spent 5 years, last 5 years building Q26 and then eventually selling that out. And then now at Euler, I think the reason, I mean, why we as an Indian entrepreneur don't file a lot of IPs, and this might be from a very different context and perspective. मुझे लगता है इंडिया में people thinks कि सब चलता है, as in like whether if you're solving a problem, I think none of my customer at Q26 asked me कि यार ये जो computer vision या ML का problem आपने solve किया है, does it infringe on Apple's IP or does it infringes on any other people's IP? US में the customers, be it Apple or Samsung that we were pitching to, they asked us this very first question. Do you have a defensible IP? Show us which are your provisional patents and stuff. So that sets the tone of the kind of the culture we are living in. So while I am building the business, I am thinking what are my key priorities. I mean, one of them is revenue, getting money, developing, growing, scaling. But in none of that, like building a defensible IP comes. Obviously, you can see if it's a deep tech startup, then you have to have an IP, and by default. When we started, we filed a lot of IPs even now, and Indian IP, and there was another point that I wanted to bring, was filing Indian IP versus the US IP. As in, I think there's a brand value attached to US IP. Specifically, I think if you file a US IP, at least people think here, okay, there's a litigation, there are, the way it has been branded, even Samsung gets penalized when while Apple if they infringe it. But India, there's a lot of OEMs releasing products that infringes on IP, still going around doing business. So, am I totally disappointed that this is going to be the future of India? Answer is no. I mean, obviously, as a DIPP startup which we are part of, I get emails from government on how they are helping us with filing more IPs, making it accessible. Was it there 10 years back when I'm thinking? Probably it was fairly less. I don't even knew the entire processes of like filing. So it's improving, and I think people are getting serious about it. But I think so if entrepreneurs or businesses or somebody has to take actually care about like filing IP, they need to think. I mean, one is like why Indian IPs are going to be important. Are they? I mean, if you file and this is somebody infringed, what is the government going to do with you? Let's say if you fight against them, will it take 10-year battle to fight against another startup? Then there's no point actually filing it. So the context, so my context has been fairly bit different from like I think what we have been talking, but irrespective, filing your IP is very important, and I think if you have global ambition like an electric vehicle, I think it's not just an India problem. I mean, all developing nations have some of these kinds of challenges that India is facing, and if you want to have global ambition, you need to fight it.
Absolutely. I think as I put on my investor hat, it's one of the questions that we always ask the entrepreneur. Do you have, what's your IP? Have you filed it? How are you protected, not only in India but outside of India? Mr. Murli, I want to now come to you and ask you about the STEM cell that you have at IISc. What kind of work are you doing there? What kind of entrepreneurs are you seeing? Are there some successful entrepreneurs that have come out from the cell, because you've been running this program, or IISc has been running this program for about 10-12 years. So talk to us about what you do and what kind of research you're seeing.
I think most of you know about IISc, as the introduction said, that it's primarily a research-driven organization. What it means, more than 80% of the students are pursuing research either through PhD or MS programs. The reason I mentioned that is therefore the profile of students and faculty is very different. For example, the faculty, because they themselves spend more time on research, okay, they don't teach many classes, okay, And the way they are measured is actually through their publications. In fact, one reason for the number of patent applications being lower is because the moment you publish, you cannot patent it. And therefore, if you're going to be measured on number of publications and the quality of publications, I mean, the thought of patenting doesn't even occur to most practitioners. Okay. However, the good news is it's changing, noticing that some of this has to be protected, and therefore the number of patent applications even from IAC is increasing significantly. The second thing I want to highlight, which Saurav did mention, I think it's important to distinguish between a patent and an IP. There are a lot of instances where there is IP, but it is either not patentable or the inventor chooses not to patent it for various reasons. For example, the cost of patenting in India is very little, whereas the moment you choose to go outside, it's very, very expensive. So if you're a startup, okay, I mean, do you spend your money on applying for a patent or do you actually use it? I mean, it's not a very easy decision. I just want to highlight these two aspects because patents are easy to measure, whereas IP is not easy to measure, but as important because essentially patent comes out of knowledge and IP. Now to get back to what we said, it's about 10 years ago that in IAC the incubation of startups started. Before that it was primarily licensing of whatever patents IAC had to large companies. And those was far and few between because as most of you would know, not all patents are actually really usable or of interest to large companies. So it's only the last 10 years recognition of the fact that some of these research output, which include patented as well as non-patented, can only be realized through product and solutions through a startup route and not through an enterprise route. So that is when there was greater focus on incubating startups. And because IISc itself is very strong in all disciplines of science and engineering, unlike IITs which are primarily strong in engineering, therefore at our incubator at IISc we are domain agnostic. In fact, we have as of today about 18 companies on campus and they are spread across domains like space, agriculture, biotech, medical devices and so on. And also it's open to anyone, so some of them are actually promoted by faculty as one of the co-founders, some of them by alumni, and a few from outsiders who have no prior connection to IISc. The last thing I want to highlight is that while there is clear recognition that these startups are very different from most of the startups that we hear about, because they are based on, and also one other thing that we do, which I want to share, is for whatever reason, I think the word deep tech is used too loosely in my opinion. Okay? I mean, every other company calls itself deep tech. So one of the things we said is no, we call it deep science and tech because first you have to have the science behind it before you try to build the technology around it. So because these are all across different domains, we have challenges. One is that needs are very different. For example, as an incubator, most incubators would say, what common resources can I provide? I mean, one requires a wet lab, one requires tremendous computing power, and third one requires something else. So you can't provide all of that. But fortunately, IISc departments have a lot of resources which they can have access to. The second is, I think this is a very important point, and unfortunately, a lot of people in the startup ecosystem that they encounter, be it the government or VCs or others, and for the simple reason that the kind of startups that they have seen in the last maybe 10 or 15 years, or of a 2 or 3 times, they still are looking at a very early stage of scale and exits and so on. Whereas most companies which truly have science behind them, to get their first version out into the market takes at least 5 years. Which means to really scale it and look at an exit, maybe it takes another 5 years. So unless as the, stakeholders in the ecosystem, we have that kind of, long-term vision in mind, it will be very difficult to make them successful. So the challenges we face today actually are primarily in one early stage funding or seed stage funding. And the second actually is very important, which again I'm not sure it is easy to solve, is most of these companies, because they're building physical products, and I'm sure probably Dr. Charit has encountered this, even at the prototyping stage they need access to precision manufacturing, which India does not have. So imagine a startup having to build 3 pieces of prototype to go to Taiwan or Korea, I think is a huge challenge, both in terms of cost and otherwise. It's not an easy problem to solve, but when you're really doing true science and tech-based companies, these are some of the challenges. But the good news is that there is a large number of them coming out now. And therefore, I think it's just a matter of time, of a few years, before we begin to see great success. And the last bit I just want to add is that some of the problems that they are solving, like the one that we saw in Tricor, are problems which nobody else is going to solve for us. And therefore, I think we have the right time and opportunity now because the problem exists. There are no great solutions available to take them to rural areas, etc. They need to be affordable. And the last important thing is the market is right here, which is a very key factor for a startup to really start building their initial customers.
Thank you, Murli. That's a great incubator's perspective. That's a very good segue for me, Noriaki-san, to come to you to get the investor's perspective. He spoke about the fact that there's a fairly long life cycle from concept to commercialization and exits and so on. Your perspective on that. But I also would like to hear from you. UTech invests in 3 or 4 different areas. Life sciences, IT, physical sciences and engineering and so on. And there have been, your focus in India, as far as I can see, has been more tilted towards life sciences. So what do you see from a research happening here? Why are you encouraged by that sector and not as much by the others? If I may ask, and what's your thought on this whole journey from prototyping to commercialization to exit and so on?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we have already invested 3 companies. The one is Tricot, and the other one is Bugworks. It's an antibiotic company, and Bloom, of course. And yes, both are related to the healthcare companies. But as you said, our investment thesis and the target is 3 areas: IT, healthcare, and hardware. But there is actually no reason it's happened to invest in healthcare companies now. So for example, Tricot, we cannot say it's simple healthcare companies. They are doing a lot of AI, and they are also manufacturing the hardware. So how can we allocate this company to which area? And Bugworks is the same. They are using a lot of IT. There are a lot of bioinformatic people. So I think the technology-wise, the most important thing is the multi-functional, transfusional area industry is very important. When I went to a Bugworks office, there is a very good quote. It says, "Great science knows no boundaries." I'm a strong believer about that. And to answer the second question, I think is that yes, some people think the hard tech is a long life cycle, need to take a lot of cash, a lot of capital to launch the product, which is true. But at the same time, if you think about the B2C, I think it's easier to launch the product itself because they only build the software products. But to expand their services, maybe they need to invest a lot. Especially in India, they sometimes invest maybe 20 or 30 million US dollars to compete other strong competitors. In that sense, if the big tech companies can build a strong competitive advantage by using the strong IP, expanding is relatively easier in terms of the time and the capital. That's how it is.
Thank you, Dr. Charit is putting the question back to you in terms of this whole journey in deep tech, from concept to now commercialization. You have already by now done $1.5 million ECPs, you've saved thousands of lives, so you've come a long way. How has this journey been for you? How long has this been for you? What were some of the initial challenges that you faced, and did you get the right kind of partners? Did you look for partners, whether in academia or in industry? And how have they played a role in your journey, in your success?
It's a very loaded question, and I think I'm one of those examples of of a company that has succeeded, and succeeded because of the timely help that I've got. So when I started this journey back in 2009, it was very hard for a doctor with no knowledge of business, no technical ability, but only with the problem to solve, to create a company and then launch it into the market. It took me 3 years to find a co-founder from the technology space. It took an additional 2 years to find the right investor, to believe in what we do, to believe in the early results that we had, so that they will help not only financially in the form of investment, and Bloom is our seed fund, seed investor and Series A investor, but also provide an ecosystem that a doctor can team up with 2 PhDs to form Tricog and to get it to market. So I believe that what we are seeing is a transformational change in the ability for this to happen. I could not make it happen back in 2009, but I was able to succeed because of that ecosystem that grew into the fact that I was able to meet with people, quit job to start a startup, get a round of VC funding that enabled us to grow, and then raise another round of subsequent Series A. What has changed, especially in India, is the fact that prior to this last couple of years, the venture capital community would be very hesitant to invest in deep tech. And this was far more driven by the fact that they didn't understand the economics, they didn't understand the life cycle, they didn't understand the future of deep tech, they didn't understand what it took to exist. What happened subsequently is that people did develop confidence in the fact that yes, you can invest in deep tech, and Tricog is one of those examples. So I believe there's a combination of all that has happened for us to be able to get from an idea to raising Series A, to getting to market, and reaching a scale of being one of the largest FAI companies today.
And that's been an amazing journey. You brought out a very interesting point about the structure of the founding team. It took you a long time, 2 years or 3 years, to find some co-founders who bring in the deep tech knowledge. You are the domain expert, you are the cardiologist. You're solving cardiac problems, so you bring the domain knowledge. But it took you a while to get the other side. That's a very interesting point, and I think a very important success factor. Saurabh, coming to you, just looking at it from the perspective of such a founding team, bringing in a business person, bringing in a domain expert. In your case, we're talking about mobility, we're talking about energy, sustainable energy, and how do you convert this into a good business model? To come back to what Murli said, it takes time, and you've got to convince the investors out here in terms of the fact that there is, at the end of this journey, there is a significant opportunity there. And that's the other question that I have for you. Quite a few people will say that we have 1.3 billion people and therefore 1.3 billion opportunities. But somebody else will say, no, I think we've got to segment this into a much smaller segment, and I really have only this small little slice of that opportunity. How do you see this opportunity? So that's your second question. The first is more in terms of setting up the team and developing a vision, which is a longer term vision.
Okay, so I'll give you both examples of the current company and the previous company, and how I looked at this differently this time than the previous one. So in Cube26, we spent almost, I think, 2 years trying to optimize the machine learning algorithm that we had written to run very optimized on a smartphone to be able to detect, let's just say, people's face, eyes, and their emotional states and stuff. And after we have built the technology, we struggled another for a year trying to understand the product market fit. Somewhere around that time, one of the early advisors at Q26 told us that it's very hard for a technology company to just sell technology. Product sells much faster, so always think in terms of product. The moment we started thinking about, instead of selling that piece of IP or technology that we had built, we started thinking about how it would manifest into a product and can we license that product. Right, because when there's a product, let's say it was in part of a video player, it was part of a different toy which is trying to interact with humans, and suddenly there were different customers willing to pay us money for what we have built. So, but that journey took us 3 years for me to understand that. So when we were building Euler and we were thinking, so we had to build this electric 3-wheeler or 4-wheeler vehicle. So instead of saying, okay, we will go and we start building each of these parts, we started focusing on what are some of the niche product market fit that actually people are struggling with, that electric vehicle can immediately solve as a product offering. And once we have kind of logged on to that product market fit, then we came back and said, okay, what are the technology pieces we really need to develop it? It might not be IP immediately, but let's first build it to be able to showcase that, okay, electric and something sustainable product, something can actually get here. And then once we built that, then we had traction coming in. And then while you are in this process of building, then you're also trying to figure out, okay, well, we are not going to build everything ourselves. What is some of the pieces that we are going to build and be extremely good at, which will become our defensible IP. So I think when we took the problem with a different approach, when we inverted the problem, and this is like coming from an entrepreneur perspective. Earlier I was more like a graduate student coming out of college, wanting to start up, and then had some background into some of the machine learning and computer vision, getting into business. But this time it was a bit different. And when we inverted, I think from the time it took us to launch the product to make revenue to get traction was much shorter. So within the 1 year that we had spent, we already have customer. Bloom is one of the investors in our first round that we got. So that was, I think, one way we were able to short circuit.
But that's it. I think this is learning from your first startup to using that in the second one. Before I go to the audience, if you have any questions, there's one question for you, Noriaki-san. In terms of how do you see the ecosystem, startup ecosystem for deep tech in India, the entrepreneurs, the academia, the business mentors, investment community, of course, regulatory and so on, and the partnership between these, and as you compare that with some of the other geographies that you made investments in, like Japan, Singapore, other parts of Asia, how is this ecosystem?
Yeah, I think it's simply saying Indian ecosystem looks like 20 years ago in Japan. So everybody is focusing on the B2C side. So 20 years ago there was a Rakuten, there was a SoftBank. The Japanese VC are heavily focusing on the B2C side. Nobody cares about the tech side. But the mid or later 2000s, the deep tech company called PeptideGen, which is one of our portfolio, went public. Now it's the valuation is 6 billion. That one successful case changed everything. And those one single successful case can have a power to change the situation. So I think yes, now it's India in tech is not so common, but I think it's a very good timing to think about it. So that's the reason why we bet in India from Japan, and we believe we can add value from the technology perspective. So I'm quite positive to answer your question. I'm sure the next big thing will happen from India within not a few years, within 5 or 6 years, maybe from both of you. and that can change, that can promote, that can accelerate the unity of the community. That's my belief.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Sorry. Yeah.
I have a question.
You have, okay. I want to just go around the audience and see if you folks have any questions for the panel. Maybe you want to go first and then I go there.
Yeah, I have a question. So my question is sort of targeted towards Miyake-san and Professor Murali, right? So you, for example, UTech is a classic example of University of Tokyo Edge Capital, right? So you sort of brought out a model where you sort of using the university and the professors involved in it, right? So there is a model that is working with a university plus private capital, right? And if I look at Professor Murali, right, for example, you and at IISc are sort of trying towards building that, and obviously you've been having interactions. So one question is, what have been the learnings from that, right? I mean, essentially, how can you build that? What kind of interactions do you have? And how does it help the ecosystem? And Professor Murali, and at what stage are we at in India, right? And can we replicate those models, or do you think that India needs different models, and you think that these models can be replicated across India in different universities, right? This is just IISc, which is leading the way towards it, but what can we do about it, right? Because this is more of an academia, private capital, and startup space that we're talking about, which we are leading. So that's my broad question.
So in terms of UTech's, we raised a fund from the private institutional investors and the banks. But as you said, we have a strong relationship with university. It's not only with the University of Tokyo, but other Japanese university, Singapore University, and US universities sometimes. So we think, the balance or the distance to the university is quite important. On one side, we are pure private venture capital, but on the other side, we have a very strong relationship with university. That kind of distance is quite important to promote the deep tech university-related startups. That's, I think, the secret sauce for us.
Let me take one step back and compare to answer the ecosystem issue. If you look at who funds research in India, fundamental research, it is still very largely the government. Okay. Very, very slowly, the private sector is investing in research. I think that is an indicator of what can come out of research. Whereas if you look at obviously US and South Korea and Japan, etc., the percentage of contribution from private sector for research is much higher. So that needs to increase. And that increase will only happen for two reasons. One is, of course, there is money to be invested. And the second is recognition of the fact that IP is very important for even large companies to survive. Okay. Whereas, as you know, in India, most of them survive for different reasons, but now they have to differentiate based on technology. The second is that just the way the government has to, the one which is still primarily funds research, even for truly science and technology-based companies, until now, most of the money has actually come from the government. In fact, in our case, almost all the seed capital has come from grants we got from the government, and in a small number of cases, money from private sector through their CSR initiative. Now, I think this is one very good thing that the government did, which is to include technology incubation as a CSR activity, in addition to the normal thing of building toilets in hospitals and so on. Okay. So I think very slowly we see a change, but I still believe that in the next 5 years, the bulk of the early stage funding for truly deep science startups will still come from the government. That means that needs to change, but if you really ask me, I think we are at least about 2 or 3 years away before we see pure investors coming in and filling that gap.
Thank you. There's a question at the back there.
Yeah, Professor, you mentioned that you have to send things to Taiwan and South Korea for precision manufacturing. So I was wondering if you could tell us more about what kind of infrastructure is missing here and what kind of investment will be required for that.
Actually, it's a little difficult for me to answer because these are across domains, but I just want to correct that this is not true in all cases. I mean, some of them actually have located providers in India who have been able to meet their requirements. Okay. For instance, one of the very common platforms for a lot of our companies is microfluidics. Okay. And to build those kind of channels and so on, clearly requires a precision one. In fact, some of that for prototyping is actually available in IISc itself through the Nanotechnology Center, similar in IIT Bombay. Okay. But I think in a few cases they had no choice, either because they couldn't find a manufacturer who had the capability, or maybe it simply did not exist. Okay. But unfortunately, I can't give a specific example because these are across different domains.
Yes, I thought you were talking about maybe a big semiconductor fab, or is it something large like that, or it could be something much easier?
No, I was not talking of semiconductor lab, but even if you, and also the problem.
A fab, I'm sorry, a big fabrication unit for semiconductor.
No, actually, interestingly, the problem is that there are some manufacturers in India who would actually have the capability, but who will do it for volume. Whereas to do 10 pieces of something is not obviously attractive to them, and so you actually have a chicken and egg situation. I mean, where do you go? And sometimes, actually, interestingly, they found it easier to get it from there, even though it was more expensive. I mean, I don't know the real reasons behind it, but that is unfortunately true.
Since we are running out of time, can you take the question outside? I'm sorry, you also have a question? We started a little late, but I know we have something else that is scheduled at 5 o'clock. But before I close, I'm going to ask each of the panelists, if you had 500 rupees, where would you bet that on in India? Which area? If you have a specific project, or if you are looking at a specific area like health or water or energy, where you think we can leverage, that company or that idea can leverage our size, our scale, as well as our demographic dividend, our rising economy, that will give this company a global footprint, make it into a global company. Which would be that area? 500 rupees.
I mean, water.
Okay.
Healthcare,
Of course.
build in India and then export to the world.
Most of the problem you mentioned, healthcare, as this was a sustainable energy. That's where I'm betting all of it.
You really think India will?
Yes, yes. It has the potential. I mean, whether India does it or not, it depends on some of us, government,
Follow-up investment to Tripod.
On that very good note, we want to thank the panelists here, thank the audience for your attention. I'm sorry I couldn't take a couple of questions, but maybe you want to just reach out to the panelists outside over a cup of tea. Thank you again.